Hey, what's up, guys? Just wanted to give you an update on the current situation here at Los Libertinos. So basically, I was off for a month because my wife gave birth to our second daughter, Camila. She came in a little earlier than expected, so we were having to deal with having to be at the NICU with her for a couple of weeks. She's been home now for a couple of weeks. Mama's healthy, baby's healthy, and we are excited about this new life of with our family of four. So I'd like to give a special thanks to Justin, our producer, for putting out some content while I was gone, holding the fort basically for us here, and just let you know that I'm going to be doing these shows weekly. The idea is to give you guys some content like I was before. You guys know that I'm new at this podcasting thing, but my intentions are sincere in trying to give you guys some good content. So thank you for the support. We appreciate any prayers that are sent our way, and I'm back. Peace. Welcome, everyone, to Los Libertinos podcast. I am your host, Carlos Abelar, and this is Chingazos and Fire, episode number 22. Our guest today is Marc Clair. He is an OG Chingon in the Liberty podcast space. He's had his flagship show on the Lions of Liberty podcast for 8 years. He consistently puts out content, which you can get by visiting lionsofliberty.com. He is also a co-host of another podcast called Second Print Podcast, which dives into the world of comics, which he has back there in his background there somewhere. And with all this podcasting experience, it's only natural that Marc is now becoming a podcast consultant. So for anybody that's interested in that, for sure, we'll talk about that there here at the end. Welcome, Marc.
Carlos, man, it's awesome to be here. I feel like this is like my official welcome into the Latin American community. The marriage is one step, but this makes it official.
All right, there you go, man. Well, salute to that. I don't know if you're drinking or not, but I got my.
I actually just have water today, but salute.
Well, we can pretend it's tequila, man.
Yeah, could you edit that out where I said actually I have a huge glass of tequila here?
There you go, man. So yeah, man. Many people for sure in the Liberty movement would know of your work and know what you've been doing in the podcast world, but a lot of people that and it's kind of cool, man, because now I've been talking to like friends and family, and they're listening to my show, which I was like, you really are? And they're like, yeah. So a lot of people won't know who you are, my primos, primas, especially now that you've married into the raza. They're definitely gonna want to know, hey, who's this güero? Who's the güero here? So yeah, can you kind of give a rundown of born, raised, family, education, and kind of how, actually it doesn't have to be a fast, give a good rundown of how you kind of, were in California a couple years ago and now you're in Mexico. Sure. So yeah, man, give a good rundown, please.
Yeah, there's so many places to start, so I'll just pick a random point. But I grew up like on the East Coast, in like Buffalo, New York originally, and then Connecticut. Spent a lot of time there, just my high school years and all that. A little bit of time after college, but you know what? I majored in like television production, and my first idea was maybe New York City, because to really do something big in that area, it's New York or LA. But I took one visit to Los Angeles in like the year, in like I think it's like '99, and a friend of mine had already moved there. And it basically took like 1 second of getting off the plane and like feeling the air, and because I'd never really been anywhere warm. Like I think I'd gone on vacation to Florida once, but like it really just struck me like, oh, I can live here. Okay, so that's kind of what led me to moving to Los Angeles to pursue my television career, which I did for about 20 years, which I still do. I still do work in that field as well. But yeah, I guess as far as podcasting and everything goes, I mean, I was like, I'd say I was a Ron Paul guy before, not to sound like a hipster about this, but I was like a Ron Paul guy before it was cool. I started reading his column in like 1999 because a friend of mine, Howie, who's kind of a part of a podcast now, he rotates in and out on various shows. But he was a congressional page in high school for a different congressman, but he used to talk about like this guy Ron Paul, this old Texas Republican that he used to hang out with, and he'd go watch his floor speeches. And I was just like, why is this guy telling me about this old congressman? Like, who cares? But eventually he convinced me to go read his writing. And that's the first time I really started thinking differently about politics, because a lot of his writing, especially once George Bush came into office, a lot of his writing was directed at things that Republicans didn't normally criticize. So he would criticize like the war on drugs. When Bush came into office, he would criticize the war on terror. And it seemed like he was almost always attacking Republicans, actually. And that's the first time I had ever seen that, because growing up, just listening to talk radio, like in the car with my dad, it was always like, okay, Democrats go after Republicans, Republicans go after Democrats. Like, that's how it works. And I just thought that's what it was. And this is someone who actually broke that mold. So I think just seeing him before I even had a philosophy behind it, just seeing someone talk in a different way about politics, like I could tell that he actually came from a place of principle, not just from whatever team I'm on. And so that just really made me think like, oh, okay, so maybe, because that's kind of what turned me away from politics before, that it just seemed like the stupid team thing. And they both kind of seemed like maybe I agree with some one time and another, but the positions didn't seem to make sense that they all went together. They just lump a bunch of random positions into one side or another. So that's what really stood out to me about Ron Paul. So I've been reading his writing for a long time. And then when it came to the 2007 like election season, and he announced he was running for president, I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, that's obviously not going to go anywhere, but I was interested. So I tuned into the debates. And that's when he started really connecting with me with the way that he spoke, the way that he just really spoke his own truth. Like, he would say things you weren't supposed to say. He would talk about legalizing heroin. He would talk about, our overseas exploits being responsible for terrorism, being at least a factor in the cause of terrorism. And he would just get lambasted for it and made fun of and joked at. And it really made me think like everyone else seemed like the children in the room. Like, they just seemed like little, like high schoolers just pointing and laughing at each other. And this seemed like the adult in the room, even though he was saying the seemingly craziest things. To me, he seemed like the only sane one there. And it really just inspired me, the way that he was talking so openly and so boldly on this national stage, even while people are making fun of him for it. It inspired me to start talking about politics before, because I never really talked about it. It was just like, I went home and read my Ron Paul articles, or like read Rothbard. Like I read all the stuff you're supposed to read, but it was just kind of like a hobby. It was just like a thing. It wasn't something that had anything to do with my actual life or anything I talked about with anybody. So that's kind of what led to me talking about politics with people. Like, I started becoming just someone who shared. I mean, I have a vintage Ron Paul sweatshirt on, hoodie on, because it's freaking cold here today. So that really, I started like sharing his music, not his music videos, but sharing his videos, his clips from on like YouTube, just incessantly. Like, I was one of those annoying Ron Paul people who every day I'd be sharing a new Ron Paul video. And so to the point that I would probably find myself of 2008 very annoying today. But that energy I put really into that Ron Paul campaign. Like, I didn't make a lot of money in 2007, 2008, but I maxed out my campaign donations to Ron Paul because I was just that enthusiastic about something, like seeing the money bombs and seeing like him earn all this money from just like ordinary people. Just really inspired me. So I think that energy kind of spiraled into like me talking about the stuff with friends of mine, and a couple of those friends, Brian McWilliams, John Odermatt, eventually, along with another friend of ours, Dom, we all started the Lions of Liberty website together. We all went to Penn State. So that's where the lion comes from, the Nittany Lion mascot. And so we were the Lions of Liberty. We started off mostly as like a Ron Paul propaganda site, basically. We just kind of posted articles and videos about Ron Paul and like filtered a lot of the news. But like, as those campaigns wound down, we started to expand into just discussing the ideas more. The goal has always been, I think, that like something we talked about a little bit before the show is to like translate these ideas, these like deep philosophical ideas, into conversations that kind of like regular people could tune into. That was always like a real goal for me. That led to like a lot of the shows like Libertarians and Living Rooms Drinking Liquor, where we just kind of sit back and have drinks and shoot the shit. And maybe we're talking about like academic subjects, but we're not talking about them in an academic way. And that's always been a big part of what my motivation behind the podcast was. But yeah, I kind of spiraled from there. Eventually Brian started his own show, and so did John within that feed. So that's why we have 3 shows right now. Brian every Wednesday with Electric Liberty Land, and John Odermatt with Finding Freedom on Thursdays. And then I host the flagship show on Mondays. I think that pretty much gets us. Well, I didn't get you to Mexico yet, so I guess I can get there. Fast forward to a couple years ago, and I take a trip to Mexico City, and I meet the most incredible woman in the history of women. And then about last year, we got married, and that's why at this moment I'm in Mexico, because I left Los Angeles for reasons, and a lot of reasons. And this seemed like the logical place to go, at least for now, while we're sorting some things out. She, on the immigration end, basically, we're working on some things. So that's the short of it,
Yeah,
or
man.
the long of it, depending
Yeah,
on how.
no, man, fair enough. Yes, everybody knows what's up. Um, yeah, man. So like in preparing for the interview, I was checking out some of your interviews and past ones, even from years ago. I've been checking out a lot of your stuff, and what's been interesting has been the transformation of like everybody grows into who they are at this moment. And in a recent interview, you had said that you're kind of like the role you kind of put yourself in, or the character that you kind of thought of yourself was of this Marvel character called the
The
the the
Watcher.
Watcher, the
Yeah.
Watcher. And can you kind of elaborate why that was the role you played? Because in hearing you talk about it, it kind of has a non-interventionist style to it,
Yeah, yeah.
which I understand. But also, it seems like you might be shedding some of that skin. And can you kind of also talk about if that character still is going to hold true to you moving forward, or if there's another character that you feel that you're kind of grow into?
Yeah, I started as the Watcher. Now I'm Wolverine. Watch out, motherfuckers. But yeah, so my Watcher analogy, basically, to get a little nerdy here, and if you want to get nerdy with me, secondprintcomics.com. Every Wednesday, Remzo and I we have a blast talking about comics and stuff like that. But the Watcher is this character in Marvel Comics. He's this big bald alien, and his role, he's like the universal narrator of Marvel. And he is basically his role is to watch, to observe and document and chronicle things. He's part of this alien race that I guess did intervene on some world like years ago, and it was a disaster. So they took an oath where they're just going to watch over. They're going to be chroniclers, but their oath is to not intervene in other societies. So for the most part, that's what the Watcher does. Unless things get really bad, like if the whole multiverse is threatened, well then it's like, all right, I'm pretty fucking powerful. Maybe I should intervene because things have gotten this bad that I can't just stand by and watch. And that's kind of like how I see myself in some ways, because for a long time, I made what I would say is a mistake about podcasts that a lot of podcasters make, is they don't want to make the show about them. And the show kind of has to be about you, because the information and the people are already out there doing other stuff. So if it's not about you in some way, like your perspective and your take on things, what's it about? But yeah, at first I was very much like, I just want to, it's all about the guest. And I still have, as I've evolved and put more of myself into the show, I still have maintained that mentality though when I do interviews. Like I'm not huge on giving pushback in interviews. Even if I hear things I disagree with, maybe I'll plant a seed or ask a further question. But at the end of the day, like I consider a guest to my show, it's like a guest in my house. Like I'm not here to badger a guest in my house. I have friends of mine who I disagree with far more than anybody who's ever been on one of my shows. So I'm not going to badger a friend that's in my house, and I'm not going to badger someone who comes on my show. That's just always been my approach. So I've always just tried. I think that's why I've developed a reputation, maybe, of just being a fair moderator. So at some point along the way, just people started, like people in the Libertarian Party started asking me, like, for interviews, and then those interviews led to me hosting debates between those people, which led to me just kind of becoming known for debates a little bit. And then Dave Smith, I started to do a couple debates with Dave Smith because he started to get a lot of people, especially in the last couple of years, like really calling him names and that sort of thing. So he ended up asking me to host those debates. At first, actually, he asked me, and as well as my friend Chris Spangle had introduced me to Andy Craig, and they both wanted to debate each other, and they both wanted to do it on Lions of Liberty. So I guess I just built up a reputation of being able to be an impartial sort of observer, kind of like the Watcher. And I think I'm pretty good at it, to be honest, because a lot of times I do have opinions, but people don't know my opinion at the end of a debate. So that's sort of the idea. And I wouldn't say just like with the Watcher in Marvel Comics, he intervenes when things need to be intervened in. So that doesn't mean he stops being the Watcher. He still is. He still goes back and watches when he's done intervening. So, I mean, I don't see me fully changing myself away from that role. But I mean, I think in the last like 18 months, I've really seen things like I don't know, like this COVID stuff, the lockdown stuff affected my life in a very personal way, in a very serious way. ways that turned out even for the best and made me advance my life in so many ways that I may not have without it. So I'm actually grateful for the experiences, but it's caused me to see the world in sort of a different way, and to see that I don't see the same sense of urgency in a lot of people that I think there should be, with the situations that are going on, in terms of everything that's going on with mandates, where that's actually leading. And this is not like the political issue of the day. This is a new world. This is a new fucking world we are in. And I think a lot of people are still acting like they're in the old world. So in the old world, to me, it was fun to, have long drawn out conversations about the implications of libertarian philosophy in a hypothetical, anarcho-capitalist society. And I love philosophical conversations and discussions, and that stuff is interesting to me. But is that what matters now? And I feel like I do have some kind of responsibility at some point. If I have this platform and a lot of people respect me and know me over the years, that if I see something that needs to be intervened in, that I do something or say something. So I guess that's what's led me to be a little more vocal. Like when I've been on a couple other podcasts recently, I was just on with Pete Quinones and on with Part of the Problem. And I kind of just like spoke my opinions a lot more than I did in the past. And I don't know, some people, I know some people in the Mises Caucus were upset by some things I said, which I never intended to really attack anyone. And I still don't think I don't think I really did either. But I look at anything I say is because I wouldn't give a shit if I didn't love everybody in this kind of liberty world. Like I kind of see everybody that came from this anyway, everybody that owns a piece of Ron Paul memorabilia, you are like a brother to me in some way, shape, or form, brother, sister, whatever. So if I see something serious happening and I don't see everybody seeing it, I want to wave my hands and at least say like, no, there's a fucking tiger right there. Like if I see a tiger coming at you, it's not out of disrespect to point out the tiger. It's out of love. Like I don't want the tiger to eat you. So, let's get some tiger spray. Let's get the fuck out of here. Let's do what we got to do here. So I think that a lot of people don't realize the situation that is here or is coming, and think it might just be like the political issue of the day or something that'll just roll over. And I see it very differently. And I think it's the least I can do to at least try to, at least put my hat in the ring of people who see a certain sense of urgency here.
Okay, fair enough. So you continue being the watcher, and you had to intervene because things were just it was too much, like obvious that things were changing in a direction that wasn't just your normal, right? Like, hey, Trump won the election kind of stuff, or just things like that. It was a little bit more because it was worldwide. I mean, all this stuff was worldwide. Yeah, no, I hear you. Who are, so because you have an audience and because everybody respects you enough to do debates and you've interviewed a lot of people over the years, who are your like pace setters? Like when I say pace setters, I mean like people that you, whether personally or publicly or politically, that you gauge yourself against to know where you stand on some stuff. Like for a lot of people it'd be Ron Paul. I have some, I just wanted to kind of know if you even have any like that you kind of always check in on consistently to kind of see where you stand on some stuff, to see where they stand, and because you either admire them or you respect them or something like that.
I will say, I don't know if I check in per se, but I will say there are a couple of people I could mention over the last couple of years specifically that I've come to, not necessarily if I agree with them on everything, on every take, but come to take seriously, I should say. And those would be Vin Armani, or Cyprian as he's known now, and Pete Quinones. And it's not a coincidence that the two of them, because they did a couple podcasts together early in 2020. I mean, real early in 2020, like February, where they were really talking about a lot of this stuff and a lot of what was coming. And it's really struck a chord with me. It really, like, their conversations really moved me a lot. And not long after that, I brought, I'd already had Pete on a few times. He's been on since then as well, but I brought Vin on for the first time and did a couple shows with him because I just really thought the way he was seeing things unfolding, just they matched up with what I was seeing. It's not like I just listened to him and just took it for granted. I listened to him and said, oh yeah, that actually does kind of line up with everything I'm seeing. And then as months would go on and things would unfold in hindsight, the things that he was saying, and even the things that Pete was saying early on about where these things are going. Like, this is not just 2 weeks this is not just going to blow over in 2 weeks or 30 days or whatever. That this is a change. This is the change in the world, a change in reality for all intents and purposes. So because they called it so early on, and because they struck a chord with me very early on in the conversations they were having, I'd say those are two people that when I see them commenting on a situation or something like that, I take it seriously. Again, it doesn't mean I agree with every take or at all. And sometimes I really disagree with maybe some phrasing or something like that, but I take it seriously. And so I think those are two people that would just stand out to me in that regard.
So people that call things early.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a good track record, I mean, that says something.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because so today's November 4th, tomorrow would be the 5th, right? And on these days, on last couple of cycles years ago, you and I would probably be on the Ron Paul forums and Daily Paul getting ready for the money bombs, right? And someone,
I didn't know who Youngkin was until like 3 days ago. Like, I saw people in our Lions of Liberty like email chain just saying this word, and I was like, "What is a Youngkin? Is this like a new kind of furry?" Like, I literally had no idea. And then apparently it was because this big race in Virginia, and I'm so much. I'm not saying that's not important, because especially to the people who live there, local politics will affect their lives really. So, but for me, it was not my radar at all. And 4 years ago, it absolutely would have been.
Hey, what's up? Just wanted to tell you about BU. BUenterprises.com is the website of an amazing company that my wife and I have been using for the last couple of months. BU gives you a toolbox of personalized exercises, stretches, breathing, and relaxation techniques that you get to implement in your daily life. So that way you can feel a lot better about your body and your mental state throughout the day. If you are interested, please visit buenterprises.com. Use the promo code Chingazos at checkout for 20% off. You need to use it in all caps, CHINGASOS, Chingazos in all caps, to get a 20% discount off any package that you get. Once again, it is buenterprises.com. I will be giving weekly updates on how I've been feeling as the promo continues. I'm currently on week 8 of it, and I got 4 more weeks to go, and we'll see how it turns out. But I can tell you right now that I feel a lot better after my day is finished, and I hope that you can get the benefits of implementing some of these techniques into your daily life. Thank you.
Yeah, so like someone I've heard of Vin on many shows, different shows, and his Pacesetter would be his I guess spirituality or his religion, right? And he kind of aligned both of them to push the pace towards where he's left the country, I guess. And
well, technically he's still in the country because Saipan is a U.S.
Oh,
US
yeah. So yes,
but it feels he's probably left the country more than me in Mexico.
yeah. Because but yes, exactly. So what is so COVID? You said that COVID might have been the fuel to kind of push you in directions that maybe you knew you had to go, but it forced your hand to move in a direction that maybe you wanted to go. But they've also mentioned that COVID, or the I guess the religion of COVID, of how everybody respects the authority of COVID and all that. Is there any correlation or a way that how we look down? Well, not look down. We can look at people that are religious about COVID, and how you said, hey, like your point of view is to say, hey, these people don't even know, they're not even awake. When I see those people, I mean like people that aren't in our circles. Is there a way to respect how some people can just live that way and not be in the bubble of like knowing a lot of these things, where they would just wake up, go to work, put the mask on, like they're not in our bubble of things, and maybe you moving or moving these directions was a counter to that? But is there any respect built into that, or is it simply like, hey, these people just don't know, and I got to react differently?
I could definitely say, like, in my younger days, I definitely had more of that sheeple mentality, like, oh, these sheeple just following along. And I certainly have my moments where I think that to myself for sure when I see a lot of things, but I don't think that's a helpful way to look at things. And I think we have to, like you said, a lot of people just don't think about this stuff. Like when they see lockdowns and mass mandates and they hear people on TV saying things and people in government saying things, they just see the world as it is, and they're not versed in where these things might lead, and they just don't think about it. They're thinking about their lives. They're thinking about, what am I, I'm working tomorrow, what am I doing with my kid, like, normal human being stuff. So I think we need to maybe, like you said, have some more respect for the fact that just because someone follows along because they're not tuned in doesn't necessarily mean those same people are like your enemies or are like people you need to look down upon. And it's hard because it is like a libertarian trigger thing too. Like we always feel like we're the smartest and we've done as much research and we know everything, and maybe we do sometimes, but it is hard to shed that attitude, especially when you do feel you're so right. But honestly, I've been able to look back at myself in the last like 8 years, especially because I have audio evidence of myself over the last 8 years, and like I can see how much I've changed and how much just not me as a not necessarily my principles. I don't think my principles have really changed at their core, but the way I approach things, the way I approach conversations, the way I talk to other people, and of course having conversations like these every single week, and many more than every single week, really, with all the various podcasts that I do. It helps train you to have conversations, and you can bring that into the real world. And like I said, like I really wanted to have conversations that translated, and maybe they don't always. Maybe there's some episodes I've done that are too highbrow. I don't know, but I still try to approach them in that the everyman kind of way, because I'm not a freaking engineer here. Like I'm not some like rocket scientist, really. I'm kind of just a guy who took an interest in this stuff and read some books. Yeah. But I don't think I'm like a super bookworm either. So I think I can still talk to people in a pretty normal way. So I think that's something we always have to find to do. And I think the other thing we need to get off of is like this idea of convincing everybody that to be a libertarian. And I know that's hard because we want everyone to see the world in the exact way we do, because then they'll be awake, then they'll see everything. But and it's good to do that in the terms of leading by example, always speaking your truth and speaking what you speaking about things the way you see them. And that will naturally change some people to take your point of view. But I think being obsessed of converting people to becoming libertarians and being pure libertarians, like I think just approaching that in that way is an approach that isn't effective. People don't want to feel like they're trying to be converted. People want to feel like they're having a real conversation with you. And if you're truthful and stoic about the way you approach to things and the way you see things, the way you speak about things, then naturally people are going to take you seriously, at least. Maybe not on everything, but they might say, oh, well, Mark was actually right about that thing and then, oh, so maybe he is. Oh, so maybe I should listen to him about this other thing. And maybe they don't become libertarians, but you're probably going to actually get more allies that way than if you're just trying to convert everybody. And whenever I say this stuff, I speak to myself and my younger self, my current self, as much as I'm speaking to anybody else. I'm always talking to the man in the mirror. So I think, my criticisms are as much, or if not more, towards me than anyone.
Okay.
So I think we can all get better at this stuff. But
Yeah,
I think we do need to change our approach. Yeah.
And the reason I kind of brought that up, and maybe you can put your watcher cap on, because we've been in this space a little bit. At least I got into it, but this however you want to call it, like the post-libertarian Praxian stuff they call it, and that whole world, and someone like Pete is in the mix there. You chill with all these guys. I get into the mix with some of these people, and the reason I kind of brought that up about the respect side was that, so this is me now kind of like wanting to ask you, so this is what I'm doing, so this is cool. So it's like, what is this whole vibe that I get about they have to physically remove the left? And I bring that up because I checked out one of your old interviews, and you had Sam Cedar on, that was a cool interview. And at the whole time, I didn't think he wanted to kill you or kill or kill anybody on the right. Now
that might be different today. I don't know. I haven't heard him talking a while.
But the stuff that he was saying are like talking points, or everybody had the talking points that you can just implant in different years, and maybe the context changed a little bit. But I guess, what is your take on all that? Because to me, it kind of, I don't know, it kind of rubs me the wrong way that people say that, because I don't know. I mean, our family members can be from the left, or
Yeah.
some of your children can be from. So like, I know sometimes maybe they just say it to be kind of overhyped a little bit, but I don't know, man. Sometimes it seems like it comes off like they really want to remove some of these people, and I don't know.
Well,
What is your take on all that?
that's a good question. That's a great question. So the physical removal thing stems originally from like Hans Hermann Hoppe's, and I'm speaking in a very non-academic way about this, but just his idea of like covenant communities and like a private property covenant community, and he like that's his like basically his description of like a perfect like not that anything would be perfect, but like would be like having like 10,000 Liechtensteins if you couldn't, but in private property terms, because he's not actually a monarch and doesn't prefer monarchy to a private property society of that. So that's what he would prefer, like a bunch of little tiny Ancapistans. So in his view of that, if you view the left as, if you view a private property society as the ideal society, as like Hans Hermann Hoppe would, then if you just allow sort of open borders in that small community, so to speak, and allow a bunch of people to come in there that actually don't believe in private property, I think I'm doing my best to translate Hoppe here, that don't have that same respect. Eventually, if you just have no policy that keeps them out or stops them from doing things in your community, they take over your community, and now you don't have your private property community, and this is how it all falls apart. That's a very, very layman's like way to, I guess, explain that. So, and I think that's where that kind of originates from. So I don't want to speak for anyone. There are definitely like various people who have different viewpoints in that sort of group. But I think it's kind of tricky when we talk about like the left, because I used to have this like mentality of like left and right is constructed and blah, blah, blah. But as I've moved on, I do see that there are, and like scientific studies kind of back this up, there are like two different brain types, and they kind of do end up putting us all on the right or left, sort of. And that certainly doesn't mean, and I'm not trying to say I agree with even Hoppe's view necessarily, but I can see the merits in it, in that, in terms of that small community scale. Now, when we're talking about states, countries, that's a little more difficult, because I think like what a lot of the post-libertarians are really focusing on, or people like Pete or Andrew or Tho Bishop would be focusing on, are like basically getting involved in your local community, sort of like, and they mostly would prefer the GOP because just these are the only communities you're going to be able to really have influence over and have any effect, and you're probably only going to be able to do that in red areas, in red states or red cities, red counties, what have you. So like their strategy is more like congregate in those areas, and so, but I mean, in terms of like, I think in many ways, physical removal thing is like a meme. Like I don't think any of those guys would advocate literally like in our current modern society that we have now. Even if they'd want a different society, maybe ideally, would actually argue of literally like taking people who have, democratic beliefs or vote Democrat out of their communities or anything like that. You might have to ask them to really get more to the bottom of that. But I don't think anybody means that in a literal way. But they probably do.
Well, you know what?
Like,
can I push back a little bit? Only
Yeah,
because
sure.
you had that guy. What's his name? Charmel.
Oh, well, Charlemagne's a different case. Yeah, Charlemagne's a totally different case. So I wasn't even thinking about him.
Okay, he's different, but he still says the removal of. I guess he attaches the left and like bad behaviors, or even like homosexuality and all
Sure.
that stuff. I mean, I remember hearing that interview, and I was like, okay. I mean, that's his point of view, okay, but I was like, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter to me too much if there's a parade down the street, but I guess for some people,
I totally get you. Yeah, so let me try to translate this for people that aren't like well versed in these various things. So like post-libertarian to me is basically someone who's a libertarian who has always been always had those beliefs as a principle basically, and now is just kind of having more of a conversation than we used to have about it. Talking more about what political strategies are we going to implement? What can you really do with a sense of urgency? That's what I think. That's what I think there is in common with the people in that area. Someone like Charlemagne I would absolutely not classify him as a post-libertarian or any kind of libertarian, nor would he. He's explicitly not a libertarian. He's someone who wrote an article criticizing libertarians who I found interesting and brought on and again gave him the room to discuss his own ideas. But I would certainly not equate his ideas with those of like the other post-libertarians like Andrew, Tho, Pete. I wouldn't even put them in the same ballpark, although they are both influenced, you could say, to some extent by Hans Hermann Hoppe, because I mean Charlemagne is influenced by Mencius Mollberg, Curtis Yarvin, who sort of took Hoppe's private property, private property society, covenant community idea, and kind of turned it into his sort of like similar thing where it's like a CEO is sort of like CEO/king kind of thing. And he wouldn't call it a king either, but that's kind of the idea. But that's not Hoppa's idea. That's Yarvin's idea. Hoppa's is libertarian, like private property. But other people have taken that and gone in different directions. So like Charlemagne is a neo-reactionary, which is basically their whole thing is about reacting to politics. But that, yeah, I would definitely put him in a different category. And but again, it all does come down to this idea of community, and the idea of like the way we're going to be in the best shape, especially looking at like the landscape of the world right now, I think is finding our communities and finding those communities with like-minded people. So to me, that doesn't mean just coming into some neighborhood, joining with some friends and booting out people that are Democrats or vote in a weird way or something. I would just say that's more about congregating in certain areas and finding your own community. That's what the post-libertarians are more talking about. Charlemagne might be a different story. And I can be honest, I've only read a few of his articles and heard a couple of his interviews, so I don't know the extent of all his beliefs, but I would definitely categorize them very differently, and I wouldn't put him in the libertarian camp whatsoever.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. I guess, that's, you're checking me on that too, because I guess there's like a big tent of the, cause I'm in favor of creating a community, but my community, because you can't have you can, I guess, have your own little town or your own little, but my community is just a network within whether, I live in a city. So it's just my network is my community, but I still got to drive 10 minutes to my in-laws, or I got to walk down the street to my mom's or whatever. Like
who knows what the people you're passing believe, and kind of who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. So I come at it that way. So I guess sometimes when they talk a little bit like that's okay. I mean, the next time I hear it, I'll listen to it like, they're just talking shit, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it depends who it's coming from. And I might, and some people might be more serious and less talking shit than others, depending on who they are. And I'm glad you asked that though, too. Cause again, I don't always push back on my guests, even if I'm thinking something in my head, cause I'm there to give them a forum. So, some people that might have just stumbled upon Lions of Liberty might think because he's on, that means he's a libertarian, but he's explicitly not. And, actually rejects libertarianism. So I wouldn't even put him anywhere near the post-libertarians, even though they might have some overlapping beliefs. There might be things we agree on. Like I agree with some things he said on my show, and that's the fun of the conversations. There's some things I agree with, some things I don't, and I'm here to present it to everybody.
Yeah. So
as the watcher, in that role, I was the watcher in that one.
Yeah, right. Because I was like, oh shit, and then you definitely just kind of. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it's not
about that. But I'm okay with some parades, like whatever. It seems fun. These guys are having a good time. They got some cool outfits. Like I'm cool with it.
That's funny. In that Sam Cedar interview, man, it was cool because I asked you the question about like the Pacesetters, and I got into politics. My family never really got into politics. We didn't talk about it, but I got into it naturally once we got HBO. We didn't grow up with cable, but once we did, hey, I started watching this Bill Maher, and that's kind of how I got into it. And so he's always been one of my Pacesetters, and he still is. He still is one of these Pacesetters. So whenever I saw him, like Ron Paul, naturally, when he had him on, and they would always interview him and say, hey, which Republican do you like? It's Ron Paul. I wasn't surprised that the guy that I was like that I've always kind of liked, like Bill Maher, would like Ron Paul, not for everything, but would at least respect him enough to say that if he had to vote for a Republican, he would vote for him. But in listening to that interview that you had with Sam, I thought it was interesting because how far are we really from this left-right? It seems to me that even though we would claim that we're from the right, it just takes a couple of things in your life to change, or something that you might, some people would change, in a heartbeat if they had to, and it just becomes, it's like rhetoric. Like what is it about? I mean, are we divided really, or is it that we've been, or have the elites like put this division in us? Because I feel that if I was, so I'm going to interview this Ben Burgess next week, and I think I would just have a conversation like I'm having with you with anybody else. Like I've always kind of liked that vibe of that's my style, but that's not everybody's style. Everybody gets hostile about their sides and stuff like that. Is it human nature? I think you had said too that you think it is something about it's in our brains. Like you're in one of these sides. I mean, does it have to be that way?
I mean, I don't know I don't think it has to be that way in how we play it out in the real world. Well, no, in politics, kind of. I mean, it does end up being that way. Like when we get to brass tacks, it ends up being that way in terms of, I think, how people act and how people end up thinking about things. It does seem to be somewhat wired. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily 100% true in every case. I think there's obviously always like a little bit of nature versus nurture everywhere. But I don't think we need to approach it necessarily as a divide as much, you know? And again, when it comes to like politics, that's why I think just like trying to get things down to the smallest levels as possible and as decentralized as possible and putting power in different centers. And then people can kind of find, like, I really do think like the 10,000 Liechtensteins, maybe not by an unelected monarch, maybe even by a small election of locals. I don't know. But like 10,000, 100,000, a billion small communities would be the best society. And then those communities would voluntarily work with other communities. Some of them might team up and form police forces or fire departments or armies or something. And maybe before you know it, we just have the same world we have now. I don't know. But I think that if we're focusing on community, then it becomes less about having to like look at things as divisions, and you can just say, okay, I live in this community, and you know, our local politics only affects ourselves. So, and I live with like-minded people, so we're good. Maybe we interact with this other community that does things different, but we don't have control over each other. So that's fine. And maybe our streets even intersect. Like, I'm not saying these are walled communities necessarily or anything. That's just more of an ideal of the way the world is. The way I like the world to be is not necessarily where I think things are going at all. But I think people can go there on their own. I think individuals can congregate with other individuals and find communities. And sometimes, like you were saying, these communities are like online. Like a lot of my community is online. But I think for what's coming and what's here, I think physical communities of people that you trust and that trust you and that are not going to let your, you know, baby starve if you can't feed them or something, or you're taken out. You have a community that's literally going to take care of your family if something happens to you. I think that is going to be really something important in what's to come. It's not really to come. It's here.
Hey, what's up? Don't forget to visit our sponsor, palomaverdecbd.com, for all of your CBD needs. Use the promo code Chingazos at checkout, CHINGASOS, Chingazos at checkout for 25% off anything in the store. Once again, it is palomaverdecbd.com for all of your CBD needs. It is a family-run business that my wife and I run out of our home. So we appreciate any support that you show for our small business and any support that you show to this show through purchasing any of our products there using the promo code Chingazos. We appreciate any of your business, and we hope that when you get our product, you feel a lot better and more chill and calmado. Once again, palomaverdecbd.com. Thank you.
When you said the community, I started thinking of my family, and then I started thinking about your new family. And I heard you mention that you right now you're in the Efe, and I guess that's where your wife's from, and her family lives there. How has that been, like, as far as like the community? How is that something? I mean, did you grow up in a way where there was a bunch of like family members, like, you know, because Hispanic shit, man, we go deep, man. There's like primos,
Yeah.
and like a quinceañeras, like, you know, 100 people deep, easy, and all this stuff. You know, how has that been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up like, I think my family was small but extended. Like, I just, like, in my actual physical community, like my parents didn't live like super close to their close relatives, like not in the same town kind of thing. But, you know, like, we grew up in Connecticut and New York, and my parents all had family in New York. So while I didn't live like in the same community as my extended family, I saw them all the time. So like I did feel like I had like a pretty large extended family, and you know, they're Jews, so, you know, we have big parties too, and then have huge things with every seventh cousin twice removed. So I like met so much extended family through that stuff. But I think as an adult, you know, once I broke away from college, like, I've pretty much been on my own guy. Sure, I've been in relationships and that kind of thing, but never really felt like I was anything more than a guy doing my own thing. I never felt like I was forming a family with anyone until the last couple of years, till I met my wife here in Mexico City. And yeah, it's definitely a different thing. Just having your own family, like having a wife, having a child, as you know, like it's totally different than any kind of relationships you could have with anybody else, including your parents or your sisters or brothers. It's people you would die for in a way, like you wouldn't even think twice about it. it was just, there's no doubt if there was a bus coming and I had to step in front of that bus to protect either of them, it wouldn't, it's not like I would think, oh, I should do this. It would just happen. It would just, because nature would compel me to protect them. So that definitely changes a lot of my outlook on, things in life, on decisions I might make, on career moves I might make, or what have you. And it's funny because I'm going in the direction right now that on paper would be the riskier direction, maybe in normal times, having had, a very stable job for the last like 5 years and pretty much stable freelance work in the industry for 15 years before that. That was what would be considered on paper the best thing for my family. But when I factor in a bunch of other things, like where I see things going again, or where things are, look at these sweeping mandates all across the country. Now they're saying, oh yeah, that 100 employee thing, just kidding. We're going after every company now. So if you want a job in the United States and to working for someone else, you're going to have to be vaccinated. And maybe that's fine for some people, but guess what? It's not just about your vaccine. It's about compliance with everything. And maybe you take one shot. Well, guess what? It's going to be 2. Guess what? It's going to be 3. Guess what? It's every 4 months now. Guess what? Now you have to do 10 other things. Oh, and by the way, we're going to turn your bank account off if you don't do that. And this is where it's going very rapidly, faster than I think anybody, probably even myself, realizes. So to me, getting us less dependent on that system, less dependent on the system of compliance faster is the most responsible thing to do. But on paper, in the old world, in 2016, I'd probably think I was doing the opposite of the best thing for my family. So the changes of the last couple of years have flipped around many things. But again, like I was saying earlier, or like you mentioned earlier, like this is the direction I already wanted to go, because I already had this like sense of wanting to see the world more. Like I did some traveling in my like late 20s, early 30s, and it just made me think like, wow, there's so much more out there. Like I did a lot of traveling through Latin America, through Central America, South America, a little bit of Asia, and it gave me that kind of thirst to see new things, to have the freedom to go do different things. But then somewhere in there, I ended up getting a full-time job. And when you have a full-time job, like maybe you get 2 or 3 weeks off a year at the most, unless you get put on furlough in COVID. And that's what happened to me. And honestly, but prior to that, my wife and I were kind of going back and forth. She was in Mexico. I was in the US. She had a tourist visa, so she could travel back and forth to some extent, but you do that too much and it could put off flags too. So, but we were always like trying to figure out like how we're going to find time to see each other here, see each other there. And it was just coming up to this month of April where we were like I had too much work. She had a bunch of work here in Mexico, and we're like, I guess we're not going to see each other that month. And then something happened, and all her work was canceled. My work was canceled. I was put on furlough, and suddenly this thing we had been wishing and hoping for happened in a weird way, mind you, but we suddenly had all the time we needed to really spend together. And we spent like 3 months straight in Mexico together, which, led directly to us getting married and everything. So it was like that final like amount of time together we really needed to solidify that. So, it's like, yeah, on paper, maybe some bad things have happened to me, but in reality, it's been like the best year and a half of my life in so many ways. Because it's actually forced me to make steps to be more independent, to have the freedom to maybe see different things, to be in different places, and, to at the same time, not be as dependent on the system, which is just going to continue to be squeezing anybody that values any sense of liberty in their lives.
Well, then, salute to coronavirus. Then it sounds like.
Salute corona. Justin's gonna clip that one.
Have being the watcher in all these in your podcasting history, what has been the conversation on immigration that you've seen? That what are the issues that are the highest ones that get everybody the most on edge? So like, for instance, the LP of Texas put out a tweet that said open borders are the safest, or safer than closed borders, and that rubbed people the wrong way. I kind of understood what they said, but it could rub people the wrong way. So I get that. What is the take that you've seen as the watcher, and what is your take on immigration, especially since you're in Mexico right now, and you're dealing with some stuff probably that has to do with the process.
Both ways.
What has been your take?
Yeah. So it's one of those issues where I think that the issue is that everyone is pushing it through the filter of what we have now, understandably, because this is the world we have now, but of this giant democracy. But then what libertarians try to do, because we're autistic, is that, no offense to actual people that are autistic, but because we're probably doing better than we are on some of this stuff. But, because we just have to be so right and look at everything in the San Capistan in our head kind of view. People are arguing for closed versus open borders as if like we had something resembling a private property society or something. And it's just like, you can't really apply this mentality to it. It's just more complicated than that, because the truth is open borders and closed borders are both unjust at the same time. That's the real truth of the matter. So yeah, from my personal point of view, like, oh man, the things we've had to do for immigration has been horrendous. Like, I think inhumane. My wife was at a situation where she was either going to be stuck in the U.S. for 8 months, which she ended up stuck in the U.S. for 8 months. Because if she left, it would have fucked up the process. It's like they either don't want you to come, or once you're here and you want to be here, they don't want to let you leave. It's like, it's crazy. And so many of the rules make no sense whatsoever. So like, I'm prone to be like open borders in that sense. But also I think there's a difference between like being like bringing family here or even friends here or trusted people here on a one-to-one basis, versus like, I don't know, like mass amounts of people just pouring over a border or something like that. And I don't think we should look at those in the same way. I'm not even necessarily against people coming over the border at all. But I just think you can't look at it in the same way. And we have to also realize in modern politics, that's a bad visual for a lot of people that have lived their life a certain way. And maybe there are certain areas. I mean, there are certain areas where there is a lot of crime, and this is not statistically true or anything, but I'm saying for certain people, they do have a lot of a crime that is associated with those border areas. Now, a lot of that's because of the border situation in the first place. So we can play cat and mouse with where it all started. But just in terms of how we talk about it, I think it can turn a lot of people off that could otherwise be allies if we're just screaming for open borders. Same thing if we're screaming for closed borders. I don't think we should scream for either. I think it's a tough issue for libertarians, because it's an issue that affects people's lives personally. And when it affects people's lives personally, that's how people are going to view it. And that's how I view it. Like, I want to say like, yeah, leave the fucking borders wide open, because look at what's been my hell that my life has been, not my life, but that part of my life has been stressful as hell having to deal with. And we're still dealing with it. So yeah, it sucks. And it shouldn't be that way. It should not be the way it is. Like, I think it should be, I think for someone that's bringing, basically, this is the kind of the Hoppian idea, actually. Here's what it should be. And you could even do this in our current democracy, really, if you wanted to. You could basically say, like, I mean, in terms of tourism and that stuff, like, I don't know, that's kind of tricky, because people could come in as tourists and then stay, whatever. I'm not really that concerned about that either, if they're just coming in regularly participating in the economy. But I think you could at least say to have like citizenship or voting rights or receive benefits from the government or some kind. Yeah, then you need to be like a person who has gone through some process, and maybe that process should be that process should be so fucking easy if it's a relative situation. If it's I know my cousin and I'm vouching for my cousin, he should come here, basically no questions asked, because I'm vouching for him. And maybe someone has to sign a statement saying, I will even take responsibility for this person. I will financially be responsible for them for X amount of time. If they commit a crime, maybe I have to pay a fine or something. Like if you tie the responsibility to the person inviting the person, then I think that should be where our borders are as open, like basically open. Because I don't think you should be able to prevent people being with their family, like, or they're good friends even. I mean, if you're vouching for the person, now that could have a slippery slope thing too, or I just vouch for my 1,000 friends, and that's how people like. Obviously, there would have to be some kind of like.
Hey, quinceañeras, dude, 1,000 deep, dude.
Yeah, exactly. We're having a quinceañera. Bring them all. Here's the guest list.
Yeah, yesterday when they said they were saying something about like a caravan coming, they said 5,000. I divided that into quinceañeras. I was like, that's like 10 quinceañeras. That ain't nothing. Anyway, exactly. But also it's kind of funny because I don't like when they use like the fear tactic stuff, because you'll see people online. Well, we'll see people online like, oh, invasion.
Yeah.
And then like the next comment or tweet online or whatever be like, hey, I'm hanging out with my family this weekend, and it's like, okay, you're just living your normal life, but there's an invasion.
So like, is there an invasion, or are you just going to a barbecue? I don't think those match up.
Yeah, that's funny.
If there's an invasion, you're like battening down the hatches and like, yeah. Is there an invasion, or are there some guys making you fucking tacos and like having a good time? Because that's kind of what it seems more like to me.
Yeah, so I don't like that part of it, but yeah, man, I like that take that both can be right and both can be wrong, and I guess
that's the problem with the system. That's a problem with this giant democracy. Almost everything is right and wrong at the same time, because it's against the consent of somebody, and that's why we need these. The problem is one side generally, or I'm speaking in broad patterns. A lot of the left doesn't want to leave everybody else alone, whereas a lot of the right would be content to just go live in a certain county or certain communities and be left alone. But like a lot of the political left, I don't mean like your friends that kind of vote Democrat. I think that's what we have to divide up sometimes too, is like when people in our circles talk about the left, they really are talking about far leftists that are intentionally doing things that are far left and trying to control society in a centralized way. But most of the people that you and I might know in real life that are like left, they're not really those people. They're just like people that go to work. Maybe they kind of think about politics and vote Democrat, but that's because they think they want to get healthcare and stuff. It's not because they're like trying to control society or anything. So a lot of those people are like reasonable, but those aren't really the people that are that involved in politics anyway. So, it's just kind of like, where are you going to pick your political battles?
Now, I want to fill you out on this one here. I was definitely having some drinks when I had posted this, but that's okay. And I had basically just said something like, illegal immigrants are like the most post-libertarian people I know, because like, they're probably, I'm not saying that they're right wing in their, but in the context of their of probably within their, it takes a lot for somebody to physically, so when we talk about in this circle of post-libertarian, a little bit there's a lot of like kind of like the self-help and like make yourself better so you can be able to mobilize if you have to, and if you mobilize, then you can create a community politically and different. So like when you're talking about mobilizing, I mean, these people are really mobilizing and they ain't talking shit. Like they're really moving, exactly. And they do it a lot of the times with the spirituality of like, they're probably Catholic or Christian or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. Am I wrong to think that? Am I just trying to push a little bit?
I don't think you're wrong to think that at all. I think that one thing that I do find a little cringe, even from people I agree with on a lot of things, is like the supposition that everyone coming across the border legally or illegally is like a far leftist who is here for welfare benefits and that stuff, because that just doesn't hold true in reality. It doesn't hold true if you actually meet people like that. It's just like the least true thing. And I get it. I'm not saying that the Democrats don't push it for a reason, like, because they probably do get a large demographic of their vote from that community because of the tactics they use and because of how they pander. But that doesn't translate to like the reality of those people's regular beliefs on the ground at all. Actually, like they're like generally the hardest working people I know. Generally, like you said, talking about fucking mobile, they didn't let this fucking border stop them at all. So like, they're living the post-libertarian dream maybe in some ways. I don't think you're wrong there at all. And I think it's hard to separate like a view of like people from a political position from a reality on the ground, from a hypothetical. And this is why like immigration is just like such a difficult one. But I personally would tend to lean toward to agreeing with you there.
Okay, well, that's awesome, man, because that's who I'm trying to capture with this show a little bit is to tell people like, hey, when you listen to those when you're listening to those corridos about fuck the federales and all this, I was like, man, you guys are more libertarian than listening to all these corridos. Like, did you even? So they don't know, and that's what I'm trying to do here a little bit. Is
such a large part of Mexican culture is just intrinsically like not anti-authority in like the outwardly rebellious way, but just like it's just more like ingrained. We're like, yes, we all know this is bullshit. We all know these guys are corrupt. We all know the elections are rigged every fucking year. We openly talk about it, and oh, okay, we're just gonna go make tacos down the street, and yeah, we probably don't have licenses for this, and no one gives a shit. The cops don't give a shit. Like the level, like if you just look at the laws on Mexico's books, it's like obviously not a libertarian country whatsoever. But if you look at the enforcement and how much people get around the law and how much people don't give a shit about it, then it gains a lot more points. I'll say that way. And so I think there's a lot ingrained in culture here that's like, and there's a lot of conformity ingrained too. And maybe it's like a Catholic thing too. Like in Mexico City, and this is different all across Mexico. Like I leave the house, my wife and I go for a walk for like an hour or something. We're the only two people without masks. And I mean only. Maybe we'll see one other guy on a rare occasion. And there's no mask mandate. That's just a cultural thing. And I think there is like a little bit of the culture that like just wants to respect everybody. So like maybe to the extent that people see it as a respect, they wear it for that reason, but everybody does it, and it isn't the culture. So like in that sense, it's very conformist. Like you wouldn't look around and think you're in a libertarian paradise or anything seeing that. But at the core, like there is just that sentiment is very much there. And I would I know a lot of people like this too. I imagine it's even more so for the people that actually just pick up and take off across the border, whether they do it illegally or legally. Like that's some fucking adventurous shit right there,
Yeah, for sure, man. I hear you on that. Yeah, man. So I want to be respectful of your time, and I'd like to say that I had a good time talking to
Yeah,
you.
man, I had a blast.
I want to be sure that everybody can reach you on all your platforms. So could you please plug in kind of where people can reach you at and where they can check out some of your content?
Yeah, there's so much stuff. We got lionsliberty.com, 3 shows a week, myself on Mondays, again, Brian McWilliams on Wednesdays, Odie on Thursdays. Then we have secondprintcomics.com. That's where Remzo Martinez and I talk about comics every week. Have a blast doing it. I also have a Substack. It's markclair.substack.com. You can find me on Twitter. I like to tweet a lot. That's kind of like my online home. I'm at Mark. It's Mark with a C. It's at Mark, M-A-R-C, the letter D, Claire, Clair, at Mark D. Claire. I think that about covers it.
All right, fair enough. And thank you for coming on, and hopefully we could do it again when you get situated with your immigration stuff. Maybe that'd be kind of cool to. And you know, and you're thinking of moving somewhere maybe closer to where I'm at, and it'd be kind of cool to chill a little bit and see what's
We
up.
have some ideas, yeah. So we can definitely do a follow-up for sure.
All right, go for it, man. Thank you. Peace.
Thanks, Carlos.